Oh, hi, didn't see you there. I was too busy eating my cross-promotional Wuthering Heights acai bowl. The cross-promotional Wuthering Heights acai bowl was at a minimum 5 states away from me, so I blurred out the name because I'm not getting paid for this, and I recreated it at a local cafe, but I think the effect is the same. I saw while they were promoting this cross-promotional Wuthering Heights acai bowl that if Heathcliff was a real person, this would be his favorite comfort food. I don't know about that. He wouldn't be wrong, though. It's kind of good. Now I'm gonna have acai stuck in my teeth for like the rest of this video, and y'all are gonna know my big secret that I eat food. It's so embarrassing. There's just something about cacao nibs that just really, it makes you feel like you're out on the moors, you know? Does anyone still care about Wuthering Heights, by the way? Is Emily Bronte washed, or is that just me? Doesn't matter. Sorry, I take forever to make videos. Either way, as a glutton for punishment, I decided in February that not only would I watch Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights, but every Wuthering Heights adaptation I could find to scientifically determine what is the true worst Wuthering Heights adaptation, which was not an easy task, by the way, because every listicle you'll see has a vastly different number and names completely different Wuthering Heights adaptations, because there are silent films, random TV specials that aired one time and are only available in some archive in Australia. There's a musical, which I did not get to watch in time, sadly, international adaptations, movies, TV miniseries. Eventually, I'm gonna be honest, I just had to walk away. I reached a point of diminishing returns. So I'm prepared for someone in the comments to tell me that, actually, you missed this Wuthering Heights adaptation in 1974 that only aired one time in outer space. Looks like your entire video's a failure. For many of you, I'm sure Wuthering Heights is one of those books you either read in high school or pretended to read in high school. Personally, I was never assigned this book, but I did read the Twilight books, and those have a surprising amount of really bad takes about Wuthering Heights to poison my developing brain. I have read it now. I understand what I'm talking about. It would be silly to repeat the plot of all of these movies, so in case you don't know, I'm gonna break down the story for you because it is kind of complicated and hard to follow if you're going in with zero context. I should give you a general warning that this book, and hence many of the adaptations, most of them, are gonna feature some level of racism, abuse, animal abuse, just generally dark, heavy topics. So keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that everyone is terrible. Everyone basically has the same name. You will be left confused and sad, but that's Gothic literature. Hi, I decided I need to come in closer, don't mind that. This book takes place across 30 years, but it starts 30 years into the future where a guy named Lockwood goes to meet his creepy landlord named Heathcliff. Lockwood, at the worst Airbnb he's ever stayed at, sees this ghost named Kathy and asks the housekeeper, what's the deal with this ghost lady who keeps singing that Kate Bush song all night? Nellie at this point turns to the camera and goes, "Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how we got into this situation. Well, it all started with this guy named Earnshaw." So 30 years into the past, these two kids, Hindley and Kathy, are all excited for their dad to come home with presents. Except instead of Dubai chocolate and Labubus, Earnshaw brings this child who he names Heathcliff. Heathcliff is unambiguously a person of color. He is referred to as dark-skinned. People immediately react to him just based on sight, call him the G slur commonly, but Bronte historians still debate which ethnicity he might be. Despite the G slur most being associated with Romani people, it also may have just been racist shorthand at the time for a lot of different groups, especially for people on a farm who probably didn't see a ton of non-white people. Personally, I think this ambiguity is intentional and important to the story because Heathcliff is not accepted by the white people here, but he also doesn't have a clear origin, community, or culture of his own. He seems like he would be an outcast really anywhere. There is also speculation that the reason Earnshaw takes in this random child, and the reason people can't determine what he looks like, is because Heath may be Earnshaw's child out of an affair, making him half siblings with Hindley and Kathy. Again, subject matter that people dedicate entire PhDs to, not claiming to be an expert. Princess Weeks has some excellent videos about this exact topic, so if you're interested in that, highly recommend it. But back to the synopsis, Heath grows up in this family, and him and Kathy have this real siblings by chance, lovers by choice kind of vibe. Siblings are dating challenge to the max, but Hindley hates Heathcliff. 1, because racism, and 2, because Earnshaw, his dad, likes Heath way more than this stinky little guy Hindley. Earnshaw, by the way, don't get too attached to him. He's dead. Hindley inherits Wuthering Heights, and it's like when your favorite local cafe gets taken over by private equity. He kicks Heathcliff out of the house and treats him basically like an indentured servant. Nellie and Joseph, the other servants, also catch strays, Hindley gets a wife. Hindley's wife dies. Hindley gets a son, just in time for Hindley to become an alcoholic. He throws the baby down the stairs. You know, things on the moors are not great. Meanwhile, Kathy and Heathcliff go down to the Grange, which is this super fancy mansion next door where Edgar and Isabella Linton live. They're cops and rich. Kathy gets attacked by their dogs, and she spends 5 weeks there getting a Princess Diaries makeover. Heath is pissed about this because he liked Kathy better without makeup, and now she's just like other girls. He starves some baby birds. Hope you're happy, Kathy. And Kathy is like, well, at least the Lintons aren't boring as hell like you. Kathy tells Nellie that Edgar has proposed and that she could never marry Heath because they'd be poor and embarrassing. But Heathcliff runs away before he can hear Kathy say that she doesn't just love Heath, she is Heath.
I am Heathcliff.
Too bad though, Heath runs away and doesn't come back for years. When he comes back, he is mysteriously rich. Kathy's married to Edgar, and Isabella is really low on the dating options on this moor. You can imagine if your situationship, possibly half-sibling, suddenly comes back into your life, it might be a bit of a mess, and it is. Heathcliff buys Wuthering Heights from Hindley. He murders dogs. He marries and then assaults Isabella. But you know, Kathy thinks that she can fix him. She's not gonna leave her cop husband for him or anything, but you know, y'all just don't get him the way that she gets him. Don't get me wrong, every character here is terrible. I do think it's important to mention that Heathcliff is committing crimes. Kathy is also pregnant at the time. She gives birth before going crazy and dying. Most adaptations end the story there, but we are just halfway through the book. 15 years later, Kathy and Edgar's daughter, who is also named Catherine, Catherine, two different people. Catherine is running around the moors as you do.
I was looking for birds' nests.
And Heathcliff still owns Wuthering Heights. He has his own son that he had with Isabella, plus Hindley's son, Hareton, who he kind of keeps as a servant. Linton is sick, whiny, blonde, pick a struggle. Catherine wants to help Linton. Heath takes that opportunity to kidnap Catherine, this child who has done nothing wrong to him, by the way. Edgar, back at the Grange, dies. Catherine inherits the Grange, but Heath forces Catherine to marry his son, Linton. Then Heath writes Linton's will so that all of Catherine's land gets passed to him, leaving Catherine destitute. Linton dies. Heath dies. Catherine teaches Hareton how to read. They learn about the concept of generational trauma, and they live happily ever after. Heath and Kathy's romance is really the main focus in pretty much every adaptation of this story, and I'm not one of those people who is like, it's not a romance at all, but as you can probably tell, this story is also very much about trauma cycles, racism, classism, how these structural societal roles perpetuate abuse and eventually lead to people's downfall. It's actually a very short book, but it is a very complex book. I promise I'm going to get to the adaptations, but I do have, I think, something possibly controversial to say about adapting Wuthering Heights, and I need you to stick with me here. I do not mind if an adaptation only focuses on the romance or the first half of the book. I actually don't mind if an adaptation makes a ton of changes to the books. Part of being an adaptation is understanding what works in a 2-hour movie versus what works in a book, and that's not going to be the same thing all the time. However, if you're going to make changes based on a very famous and beloved book, you are inviting comparison. And if you make a change, there is an expectation that that change be good on its own. For example, Wicked. It is a core experience of theater kids to see the musical Wicked, then read the book at way too young of an age, and discover the two are literally nothing alike. Wicked the book is gayer. It's a very political commentary on eco-fascism. There's no love triangle. Fiyero is basically a completely different character. He's a person of color. Literally, he's blue. The musical and the book are fundamentally different, but I like the music. I like the focus on Elphaba and Glinda's relationship in the musical. I like the way Marissa Bodie says Bach. But there are also things I like more in the book. If you treat them as two separate things, they're both enjoyable. I think there are a lot of adaptations like that where I enjoy the book and the TV show or movie completely differently. Haunting of Hill House, The Shining, The Princess Diaries. But at the same time, as a fan of Breakfast at Tiffany's the book, I cannot stand that movie. The book Breakfast at Tiffany's is about very lost queer people, sex workers, living in New York City. The movie makes the gay main character straight, turns the platonic friendship into a by-the-books romance, and while there is a Japanese character who's probably not the most tastefully handled in the book, the racism is turned up to 1,000 in the movie, with this caricature played by a white guy Mickey Rooney. But because Audrey Hepburn was in the movie and she's an incredible woman, the movie is the thing that people care about. We all had that IKEA poster on our walls. So if you're someone who has a lot of love for Wuthering Heights, the book, and wants to see a faithful adaptation when there really aren't that many, I feel your pain. I also think that as one of the very, very few non-white characters in a period piece in classic literature, people, especially people of color, have every right to be upset when that character is replaced by a non-white actor, which is historically true for most of these adaptations. Anytime people do race-blind casting in a period piece, there are always white people in a tizzy complaining about historical accuracy. This is perhaps the only time that we wouldn't have to hear this exhausting argument, and we could actually have a conversation about how race intersects with class and abuse through the lens of this story, which has stood the test of time for a reason. Plus, as you'll see, most of these movies make the confusing choice to still include the racism. They keep the slurs and everything. They just have the person who is getting subjected to racism played by a white person.
Scrub yourself clean for all you're worth, Heathcliff. You'll never get the darkness out of your skin.
Which just actually makes no sense. So it's not that complaints about an adaptation differing from the book is automatically invalid. It's more so that a movie isn't automatically good because it's basically a book report, or bad because it makes changes. Some changes are more important to the story than others. And with that all being said, let's talk about all of the Wuthering Heights movies that I watched. It's funny though, for a book written in 1847, it is such a dark text that modern film really shies away from the hard parts of it. And it's not surprising that this version in 1939, made right in the Hays Code era, would struggle with that the most. This film was directed by William Wyler, and after this movie was made, he openly beefed with the producer, Samuel Goldwyn, because according to Wyler, Goldwyn was the one really pushing this movie into a much more basic romance story than what Wyler originally wanted. For one, the time period is adjusted forward to, I think, the Victorian era, which I think was purely done to include more fun costuming. Heathcliff cannot be played by a Romani or a person of color in this work, even though he is referred to as a dark-skinned G-slur throughout the film.
A gift to God, although it's as dark as if it came from the devil.
Because interracial romance was banned from being on screen at this time. Not that I really think that this production would have done that, even if they could anyways. Instead, everyone just pretends that Laurence Olivier isn't a conventionally attractive British man. However, something I did find really fascinating is the actress who played Kathy, Merle Oberon, was actually a white passing Sri Lankan, which some Bronte historians believe would have been Heathcliff's origins as well. She hid her race for all of her life, naturally because her race would have categorically excluded her as a romantic lead, but also really in any major role at that time. She bleached her skin, she told different stories about her heritage. She later really struggled to find roles once film in color became more and more common because her skin tone was more obvious, which really added a layer to watching this movie that Laurence Olivier as Heathcliff just couldn't deliver. Laurence Olivier, very famous. I understand that. But you can really tell that this man is a theater actor first and not a film actor.
My tears don't love you, Kathy. They blight and curse and damn you. Kathy, you loved me.
And you can also tell that Merle and Laurence hated each other. I don't know why, but Team Merle all the way. There are multiple scenes where they just don't look each other in the eye the entire time. And apparently while filming Kathy's death, Laurence couldn't cry, so they give him this menthol mist, and this menthol mist makes green goo come out of his nose. And Merle was apparently so icked out by this that she ran out of the room. I don't know if it's for that reason or if it was just how the script went, but Kathy and Edgar actually do have a lot more chemistry and a lot more screen time in this version than any of the other adaptations. You actually get the sense that Kathy is in a love triangle, not just a marriage of convenience. When Heathcliff comes back, Kathy says that she doesn't want to see him initially, and it's not until Edgar says, "Hey, you can have guy friends. I'm secure in our relationship. Bring him in," that she actually chooses to see Heath.
Darling, you may smile at him without fear of offending me, because it's my wife who smiles.
I just love the theatrics of this movie. I think it just comes with the time period.
Oh, you're hoping I won't come back. You're hoping I'll fall on the road and break my neck, aren't you?
Or when Kathy gets attacked by the dog. They kick Heathcliff out, and Heathcliff just goes full Pretty Woman on them.
But I'll be back in this house one day, Judge Lytton, and I'll pay you out. I'll bring this house down in ruins about your heads. That's my curse on you.
You've just made a big mistake. Huge. As you probably guessed, this movie does not include the second half of the book with the younger generation. Kathy doesn't even die in childbirth. She just can't hang, I guess. And then you see their ghosts run off hand in hand, which the director hated. Merle and Lawrence, by the way, refused to come back and shoot that together. So they had to use body doubles to get that ending scene. And I do think that this closing shot is responsible for a lot of the romanticization of the story in the adaptations to come. As a melodramatic golden age Hollywood romance, I weirdly like it. Maybe it's just the history around the production. Maybe it's just because I do love mess. It's also shot beautifully, so it looks great almost a century later. Is it a faithful adaptation? No, not even a little bit. See, this version, on the other hand, really put my LASIK to the test because it is not nearly as well preserved as the last one. I'm also pretty sure it's a live play, which is why the sets look so cheap, and occasionally you'll hear people stumble over their lines. This version, also probably the best illustration of why a white Heathcliff just doesn't work in the story if you're going to retain the racism aspect.
It's dark enough to have come from the devil.
Hush, Heathcliff.
He looks exactly the same as everyone else. The kids in this version are the best. This Hindley is giving it all, just stretched out.
The stables will be your home from now on. There will be no more lessons for you.
Baby Kathy?
When I saw you. He may be quite pretty under all that dirt.
I'm king of the castle. And Kathy is queen.
Give her an Oscar. Adult Kathy, I also like. Something that is very important to me in a Wuthering Heights adaptation, something that doesn't happen nearly enough, is productions are afraid to let Kathy suck. Let Kathy be a brat, not in the Charlie XCX way, but in a traditional passion for fashion way. Make her selfish, make her petty, make her violent, and this version brings it. When she gets attacked by the dogs, she's like, "Oh, Heathcliff, you better run along. I'll just be here dying with these rich people taking care of me."
I think I've broken my ankle.
I'll take you home.
No, it's too far.
Does it still hurt?
No, it's much better now.
She is yucking it up. Also, at the end, when she starts losing her mind, she genuinely seems unhinged. It's a really good performance.
Nellie, there's someone in the room. Can't you see that face?
However, I think this is my least favorite Heathcliff in any version. Every scene, he is just rubbing his face on poor Kathy, like that picture of Lil Xan and Noah Cyrus. I would also be faking a dog bite to get away from this man.
And I know it.
My little love.
I shall never know a moment. I shall be content not to hear the bees around the well.
Not to mention, his delivery at the end when Kathy is dead.
Only don't leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you. Not alone. Oh, God. Not alone!
At this point, just put me in. I guarantee I could do better. Also, when Kathy marries Edgar, she has hallucinations and hears Heathcliff's voice, but for some reason they made him sound like a robot.
Take these.
And that's how the genre of hyperpop was invented. There's no way that watching this much Wuthering Heights is good for my health, but luckily today's sponsored ZocDoc is. I know that I am not the only one who puts things off when it comes to my health. It's just so much easier to say I'll do that later. Last year I moved and changed health insurance, so I needed to find doctors that were not only local to me, but were people I could actually trust. Someone who actually listened, understood, made me feel comfortable. As someone with POTS, it's not always easy to find someone who understands my condition, but with ZocDoc I was able to search by specialty and symptoms to make sure my new primary care provider was a good fit, instead of the usual guessing and just settling. If you've never used ZocDoc before, it is a free website that helps you find and book high quality in-network doctors. Making an appointment is so easy because you can view actual patient reviews, availability, and book right from the website. No phone calls, no waiting around. You can find someone who fits your needs and actually book an appointment within minutes. Appointments made through ZocDoc typically happen fast, often within 24 to 72 hours, and sometimes even the same day. They also have the option for in-person or video visits. Listen, I want y'all to focus on your health without all the added stress of making an appointment. If there's something you've been putting off getting checked, this is a simple way to take that step. Head to ZocDoc.com/Ashley Norton and find the doctor that's right for you. Y'all deserve the care, and it's time to prioritize you. Thank you to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video and helping us all take better care of our health. This one was fine. Invented the Kate Bush song. That's about it. It's already getting redundant. I know. I don't care though. I fear this is incredibly obvious. If the person you cast as Heathcliff can also play James Bond, wrap it up. Because now it just feels like everyone in Yorkshire hates brunettes for some reason.
Looks more like a gift from the devil.
Timothy Dalton really giving that blue eye stare, just that little smirk on his face always, like he farted and got away with it. I hated this version on my first watch, actually liked it on the second watch, which actually is the most Wuthering Heights sensation of it all. This version really does make everybody terrible.
Miss Cathy's been in her room for 3 days now, sir. She hasn't had any food or a drop to drink. Well, shall I get Robert to force the door?
What, and damage it? Oh, no.
Come on, Gigi. I can't. Help me. Oh, don't be such a baby.
Don't go.
Get your dirty hands off me.
And that's how God intended. Anna Calder Marshall put her mind, body, and soul into the role of Cathy. In every scene, she is throwing hands, hooting and hollering.
I can see you.
My condolences to the audio engineer who had to mix her voice. The way she says Heathcliff, she hits every letter in that name. Cathy and Heathcliff as characters constantly have this deep love-hate relationship, and this version really does show that. But fair warning, when that is depicted on screen, it is hard not to see it sometimes as just straight up romanticizing abuse. And I do think this version doesn't always walk that line successfully. I'm just saying, when Heathcliff slammed his head into the tree at the end, I felt that. So a couple of these I wasn't able to watch before I sat down and filmed, but I watched them while I was editing. One of those is the 1978 version of Wuthering Heights, which the SEO for this is terrible because Kate Bush released her Wuthering Heights song in 1978. And I'll just say it's far superior to the miniseries that I watched here. If you are a high school / college student and you have to read this book for class and you need to be able to successfully pretend that you've read it, you should watch the 1978 version. But at this point, just read the book because, oh my God, what a slog to go through. This follows the book line for line, beat for beat across 5 episodes. It's the most literal interpretation and is a really good example of why a literal book to screen adaptation doesn't really work, because things that are in a book don't translate well to TV, especially when everything is just shot in static cam very slowly with nothing exciting happening ever. So I'm not surprised that when people talk about adaptations, they forget about this one because, oh my God, ugh, what a brutal watch. I'm really disappointed that I didn't end up having enough time to watch all of the international adaptations, or I guess I should say non-English adaptations of Wuthering Heights, because there are quite a few. There's several Bollywood ones, there's a French one, I think there is a Filipino one, maybe even 2 Filipino ones, and a telenovela. There's a lot, but the one I kept getting recommended and I knew I had to watch even if I couldn't get it in time for filming, was the Japanese version of Wuthering Heights. So this is Wuthering Heights if it was set in feudal Japan and was a samurai movie. Oh my god, that's amazing. I was told to watch this film specifically because I've heard that this is the most anti-Heathcliff, anti-romance version of the story. This version is incredibly violent, incredibly dark, but it's also one of the more ghostly adaptations. In this version, the Earnshaws and the Lintons equivalents, if you will, are rivaling houses that both worship the same god but have different spiritual beliefs and are sort of rivals in that way. So when Kinu, who is the Kathy of the story, goes to marry the Edgar of this version, it is because if she didn't marry him, she would be forced to be a nun and would be sent away from her house. So in some sense, her marriage is the only way to escape to a somewhat free life. And Onimaru, the Heathcliff of the story, would you believe he takes that very personally? And it does become his vendetta to destroy everything in her life. This version does cover both generations, and it's the only one I've seen where the second generation is actually much more interesting than the first. Onimaru kidnaps Kinu's daughter, and she grows up. His servant would be a generous word, more like his slave. And every day, Onimaru will dig up Kinu's grave and do things, you know, which is an aspect of Wuthering Heights, of course, but it is played up far, far more in this version. Kinu's daughter takes her own mother's skeleton from the grave and hides her so that Onimaru can't find her anymore. And the movie ends with Onimaru like on death's door dragging Kinu's coffin beside him. This version is so haunting and it gets the book so well. But yeah, fair warning, I mean it when I say it's dark. This was a heavy watch. This was probably the heaviest one of them all. Do you wear wigs? Because everyone in this adaptation sure does, and they're all bad. There's kind of a visual storytelling to that though. Like the bad wigs represent the depraved nature of their characters and the depraved nature of this director for allowing these wigs to happen. This is Ralph Fiennes. I've actually never pronounced his name out loud. First role, which is crazy. He gives a very understated, like brooding performance.
So I put a wire mesh over the nest, and all the little ones died when they hatched.
Why did you starve them?
Well, there wasn't any point in keeping them alive to show you.
Which I think in theory would be good. Like I think he's doing a good job. The issue is everyone in this movie is also speaking in lowercase the entire time. Even in the most dramatic confrontations, we're all just standing, staring, and mumbling at each other.
I am the owner of Wuthering Heights now.
What do you mean? Hindley and Hatton are both dispossessed.
Let's kiss you goodbye.
You won't drive me away again, Kathy.
I'm not afraid of you. Give me that key.
There's a real lack of contrast really with everything in this movie. There's barely a visual distinction between time periods. Like when Heathcliff comes back and he's rich and he's a totally different person now, we're meant to be impressed, but he just put his hair in a ponytail, guys. Instead of Nellie narrating the story, for some reason this version shows Emily Bronte, the author of Wuthering Heights, basically making fan fiction about a castle that she just found. She will voice over explain the plot throughout, but weirdly they do still include Lockwood and Nellie at the beginning. I don't really know what their thought process was there. To this point, none of the previous versions really showed Heathcliff abusing Isabella, because let's be real, it's hard to make a romance story where your lead character is just straight up abusive and horrible to other women, which in the text he absolutely is. And in this version, Heathcliff steps away to reveal Isabella's face, and it's bruised and battered. That moment genuinely is really shocking. Like, Heath is a villain in this one, not just some toxic boyfriend, but you really lose the sense of that impact because there's something about the script, the editing, something happened with this movie to make it feel so slow and so nothing that things just don't land as intensely as they should. It's a shame because there are parts of the cinematography of this movie that are really cool. There's a scene in the book where Lockwood sees Kathy's ghost outside the house, and this was the only version that showed that, where it genuinely spooked me. There's also a shot where the lightning reflects to make Kathy look like a ghost, which kind of acts as foreshadowing. It kind of reminds me of Labyrinth. Like, it does feel very gothic in the styling. This version does actually include the second half of the book. It's also the most boring part of the movie, but what can you do? This version makes the very brave, daring choice to have Juliette Binoche not only play Kathy, but also play her daughter Catherine. Just put a blonde wig and blue contacts in and she's a whole new woman. The French accent is genetic, by the way.
Go away. I removed myself from the heights. In the Grange.
I was looking for birds' nests.
So in terms of book accuracy, definitely better than the last few, but the issue with including everything is that it's going to feel rushed, especially with the added Emily Bronte scene at the beginning. You meet Catherine, Kathy's daughter, with less than 30 minutes of the movie left, and in that time, she gets kidnapped, married by force, her dad dies, her husband dies, and she has a romance with Hareton. You're not invested in these characters because you barely know them. You don't know how Catherine is different from Kathy. You're just like, wait a second, that's the same woman from earlier in a worse wig. Yes, it is. Boring, yawning, sloppy, lazy. And not only is it boring, the lead white actor is most definitely spray tanned to appear less white, and he's 35. Even Lockwood falls asleep reading the story in the first 5 minutes, like, this shit is boring. This version also includes both parts of the original book and everything bad that Heath does. The dog murders, the assaults, the wigs once again. But if you thought the 1970 version romanticized abuse, y'all are not ready for this one, because why are him and Kathy romantically looking at each other as ghosts while the music swells as if this is a happy ending? This man assaulted and kidnapped people for the sport of it. And to make things even worse, the way Kathy and Heathcliff kiss in this version is just straight up nasty. If I was on my deathbed and a man was kissing me like that, put me down. There's one shot where they kiss and you can see their saliva split across their mouths like some sick version of Lady and the Tramp. Why? Why didn't you use a different shot? It's so nasty. Things I liked about this though. I love how Edgar and Isabella in this version are very Sharpay and Ryan.
Allegro, Allegro, Allegro.
I am Allegro.
You're not.
I am.
Very gay son thought daughter. And the puppy to person ratio in this one is really top tier. Similar to the last movie, the pacing really suffers because they need to fit in this new generation of characters, and I'm shocked at how many versions choose to include this, but also make it the most boring part of the movie. Catherine is kidnapped by a strange man that she does not know, who hates her for reasons she does not understand, and then is forced to marry her own dying cousin. But where's the intensity? Why are we just sitting around? Again, why do the wigs look like that? The good news is that Matthew McFadden is in this version. He plays Hareton, and he's a delight. Look at him in that puppy. Palate cleanser for us all. It does have the unfortunate effect of really making me wish I was watching Pride and Prejudice instead. And finally, not necessarily the movie, but the promo pic. Most adaptations of Wuthering Heights really struggle to capture just how truly terrible these characters are. Spark House, the modern gender-swapped adaptation, makes the daring choice to make the characters actually 10 times worse than the original novel, while also just being incredibly mean to Richard Armitage. When I heard the concept of gender swapping, I didn't know how they were going to pull it off, because I actually do think that gender is pretty essential to the story just as much as race and class. This series was like, what if instead of misogyny contributing to everyone's fates, we just made the entire thing deeply misogynistic? Warning, this is going to be a hard pivot. Very, very dark detail relating to sex that's even darker than what we've been talking about previously. So if you want to skip forward in this review, please do so. Carol, the Heathcliff of the story, instead of dealing with racism, she deals with the stigma of being an assault victim. Everyone but Andrew, the Kathy of this story, knows that Carol's younger sister is actually her daughter that she had in secret when she was 12. And the father is her own abusive dad. Andrew's dad violates HIPAA to tell Andrew, oh, by the way, you shouldn't marry Carol because she's a bad girl because of this thing that happened to her. It's not that the stigma is unrealistic. Like, I do believe that people in a small town could be terrible to this teenage girl for a crime committed against her, but I also think it's an unnecessarily graphic addition to the story, where if you could take this completely out of the story, it would be exactly the same. Stories can deal with difficult subject matter without it being purely for shock value. Wuthering Heights, the novel, is a prime example of that. So I will not mention this further in the review, but just so you know, throughout the story, Carol also has a daughter/sister that she feels responsible for. Okay? On a lighter note, Andrew is like if you took Kathy from the novel and made her a man. Crazy, I know. But at least Kathy has the excuse of living within the confines of a patriarchal society where her only means of mobility is through the men around her. Andrew is just a rich white guy. This is what I mean about the gender being important.
Andrew?
I've had a baby. Are you doing anything?
Andrew is the kind of guy in a zombie apocalypse who would hide his zombie bite from you. He's the kind of guy who, even though he has the aisle seat on an airplane, uses the middle seat armrest. He's the kind of guy who doesn't get his dog's nails trimmed. I don't like this guy. I don't like seeing this guy on my screen.
Carol, go away. Go away.
But for some reason, Carol does. I forgot to explain something important in Spark House. Andrew and Carol, Heath and Kathy, don't grow up in the same house together. They have two separate households and two separate families. So Andrew's family is kind of a weird amalgamation of the Linton's family. So they're not siblings. I had to mention that because otherwise this review gets confusing. So Carol and Andrew try to get married, but then Andrew stands her up at the altar. I hate this man. Carol responds to this by hanging Andrew's family dog, which, yes, is a detail in the book, but I actually cannot believe that of all the things that they changed for it to be modern, that this was something that they retained from the original book. Not to mention, in the book, this is presented as a genuinely psychopathic thing to do, because it is. Here, Andrew's mom understandably holds a grudge because Carol violently murdered her dog, and everyone is just like, oh my god, get a load of this lady.
Put her away from the cars and don't let her near a dog.
You may occasionally wonder if the kind of maliciousness that Andrew's mother exhibits is innate, or something she's honed and perfected over a long period of time.
God, my wife is the worst. That's why I cheat on her all the time. That's another detail. All of the parents are present in this story and cheating on each other all the time, just because I guess it fills the runtime. So Carol, after that dog incident, runs away and becomes rich off of importing bananas.
What is it that you do exactly?
I import bananas.
But it turns out actually she's not rich. She just faked being rich for clout for some reason. So she needs to marry Richard Armitage for his money.
You want me to sell my house and put money into your farm?
Yeah?
But legally, you own everything. You're legal tenant.
Yeah, well, I can't change that.
Another essential element to the Wuthering Heights story is how Heathcliff's wealth opens doors for him that weren't previously available to him. But in this version, Carol, the woman, essentially needs to trick and financially abuse a man, who I guess is Isabella in the story, to keep her parents' farm. Meanwhile, Andrew has married Becky. By the way, we go straight from discussions of child abuse and like dog murder to a wacky sex montage between Becky and Andrew. I hated watching this. The night Becky gives birth, Andrew leaves to go sleep with Carol in a field.
But my wife gave birth to my baby and I'm up on the moors at 5 o'clock in the morning, snogging another woman. I haven't slept with her once, not since you came back.
She's had a job on, she's been giving birth.
I'll leave her. I'll leave her and the baby.
I hate this man. And the story ends because Carol tells Andrew not to leave his wife and freshly newborn baby, so he drinks himself to death in the fields, and we're supposed to care? If this is your favorite Wuthering Heights, actually stay away from me. Another modern adaptation, which is thankfully much less dark, is from MTV. It's everything you would expect from a 2000s MTV movie, which I'm about.
Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. How about I've been holding on for 23 years, Dad?
Instead of the moors, Wuthering Heights is a lighthouse. Kathy is having a real Drew Barrymore moment out in the rain when all of a sudden her dad finds this little blonde boy named Heath. Kate's brother, Hendrix, not happy about this.
That's your surprise?
Yeah.
I hate that song.
Also, he has a mohawk. This time, Heath is a musician and he makes music of some quality.
If you should laugh, I'll smile and pretend that I made the joke.
Hendrix is jealous because no one even cares that he also makes music of some quality. Kate wants to leave this lighthouse and explore the world, which Heathcliff is not going to let her do.
Yeah, well, I've been somewhere else, and trust me, it's better here.
Trust me, Kate. I saw the world when I was 5. You do not want to go out there.
And what if I want to go somewhere else?
I won't let you.
I won't let you. You're gonna sit here and watch me sing songs and do donuts on my dirt bike, Kate. Edward Linton, dressed in business casual, just got off work at Enron, playing a little cello at 1 a.m., still in business casual. Heath is not having it.
Leave me alone! What are you doing?
Instead of getting attacked by a dog, Edward hits Kate with his car. And because hospitals weren't invented yet in 2003, she stays in a coma for several days at the Linton's house. Isabella, kind of gay in this version.
Hi. Thought you might like some girl company. There's a time for the childhood sweetheart thing to be over. You'll find somebody new.
Kind of gay and kind of acting circles around everyone. Isabella adopts Heath, who is, going around pretending to be homeless for a day, a la Tyra Banks. Isabella keeps Heath in her dorm. She cleans for him, she cooks for him, his rent is paid, uploads his music to MySpace, and makes him a viral sensation.
People need to hear your music.
People don't need to hear this.
Wait, Pete! You're gonna love me for what I've done! I just sent you out into the world!
And he has the nerve to dedicate his very successful music career to Kate.
This next song is for Kate.
Some people get by with a whole lot more.
Justice for Newsies' Katherine Heigl. Meanwhile, Kate is married to Edward, who only wants Kate to kiss like this.
Why do you close your eyes when I kiss you?
Edward, by the way, he's not a nice guy in the book, like he's racist, he cuts off his sister financially, but in this version, he is a stalker. He spies on Kate with a telescope. He watches her in the bath. And Heath is Heath. So the options for Kate in this one are less than ideal. Listen, this is not a good movie, but at least you're having fun. When Edward threw his cello in slow motion off a balcony, I felt that. But I also feel like we could have figured out from the beginning that between a guy wearing a shark tooth necklace and a guy who straps his BlackBerry to his belt, this was never going to end well, was it? So when I first decided to watch adaptations, I originally was only going to watch movies, and I do just think that for a good book-accurate adaptation, you need a prestige television 8-episode miniseries, maybe even 2 seasons. So I originally wasn't going to include miniseries like Spark House or this 2009 version, because with the added screen time, it just didn't feel like it would be a fair comparison. But then I found out the runtime for both of those was only 3 hours, which isn't that much longer than a lot of the movies. It does definitely use that advantage. The pacing of this is so much better than the movies. On the other hand, because this is a TV show in the early 2000s, it does look cheap at times, even though I doubt that this was a cheap production. The color grading in this show is so off. You do not get the spooky fog atmosphere of the book at all, and there's some cheesy cinematography choices, but overall, if you are a fan of the book and you're looking for the best adaptation to cover both parts of the book, this is it. That being said, Tom Hardy. White. Are we surprised? I do think that he has a really good balance of being genuinely scary, but also endearing. It's really hard to believe Heathcliff could be somebody Kathy could love, but also somebody who does all of these awful things. And Tom Hardy has the benefit of more screen time to really flesh out how those contradictions can exist. This show is a really good example of making changes for an adaptation that translate better to a visual media like film, but are still in the spirit of the original work. So many of these adaptations open with Lockwood visiting Wuthering Heights. Part of what makes that compelling in the book is he walks in on this very weird, confusing scene. No one's really talking to him. And then Nellie tells him this story. And because Nellie is a witness to all of this, she's not a central character. There is this element of, is Nellie exaggerating? Is Nellie telling the truth? And also, if you're adapting both parts, you circle back to Lockwood at the end because he walks in towards the end of the story chronologically. But if you're just adapting the first part, having Lockwood's scene doesn't add anything. And even if you do include it, Lockwood's internal monologue is so important to that scene because for the most part, everyone in that scene is just giving him the lead paint stare. It doesn't give the same intrigue on film because you're not hearing what he's thinking. So in this version instead, the story starts where Heathcliff is coming to take Linton back from Edgar.
Don't leave me, Uncle Edgar! You must be kind to your son, else as God is my witness, I shall find a way of hurting you.
I shall be very kind to him, you needn't fear.
Who is this very sick child. Catherine, the daughter, just sees her dad cowering in fear in front of this crazy man, and she's like, what's happening? Why are you letting this man take my cousin? And then she gets kidnapped, again by a man that we as the audience do not know.
I know you, Catherine.
You may know my name, but you don't know me.
I know enough to know that today is your birthday.
She's trapped in this house. She's scared. She runs around and finds a room with her mother's name carved all over the walls.
You would not leave. All the doors have been locked, Catherine.
It is genuinely unsettling and confusing. And instead of it being some rando like Lockwood, it is Catherine learning how Heathcliff became this monster. It then goes through the story pretty close to the book, but unlike other adaptations, it has the room to develop relationships we don't really see, like Heathcliff's relationship with Earnshaw, who most of the time just kind of dies in the first 5 minutes. They include the speculation that Heath might be Kathy's half-sibling.
The other boy said that Heathcliff was your bastard.
So on top of the racism, which yes, they do still include, people don't like Heath and they don't like the family because they suspect that he's an illegitimate child.
The boy was only repeating what the whole village is saying. We cannot attend church without fingers pointing.
Also, a lot of versions of Hindley, he's like this big macho guy, like this really big physical threat. But in this version, he's just kind of a dweeb.
Don't just stand there gawping, Heathcliff. Go and see to the horses.
And that is again a really smart choice because it makes Hindley's jealousy make a lot more sense. Hindley's only power over Heath is his money. And once Heath comes back rich, he's powerless. If someone were to combine this version with the next version we're going to talk about, I do think that it would be my perfect adaptation of Wuthering Heights. 2011 Wuthering Heights is exactly what Saltburn thought that it was. It has beautiful cinematography, but it's also horny, gross, dark. It has a grave scene, like the grave scene, but it also actually says something about race, class, trauma. I remember thinking I was a genius and I was the only person that had had this thought, but then I found a Vulture article from 2 years ago saying literally exactly that. Roxana Haddadi, excellent work. I also do think that Emerald Fennell saw your article and made Wuthering Heights 2026 out of spite, but we'll get to that later. This version by Andrea Arnold is, to my knowledge, the first version to actually feature a person of color as Heathcliff. There are some changes to the dialogue which explicitly address Heath as a black man. From what I could see, Andrea Arnold did initially look for someone in the Romani community in the UK, and then she expanded it to people of mixed races from various cultures. Because Heathcliff was found in Liverpool, which was a port city, there is speculation that Heath may have been a black man or a mixed race black man with the slave trade going on there. And that is the interpretation that this version takes. And it feels much more immediate because it's not just random slurs being thrown at a white man with a spray tan. Like, it actually makes sense in the context of the story. Andrea Arnold said that the decision to have Heathcliff played by a non-white actor came from her reading the book. To me, it seemed quite clear that he wasn't white-skinned. It seemed to be Emily was playing with something she didn't fully commit to. Her descriptions of him are vague, but not. Again, we're going to talk about this later, but contrast this with the 2026 version. The casting director Cochran's response to criticism of both the actor's age and Jacob Elordi's ethnicity, there was no need to be accurate as the source material is just a book. The standout of this movie is definitely the cinematography by Robbie Ryan. The win budget maxed out. I could see this movie being divisive, like you either love it or you hate it, because it's a very slow-paced, spooky, cruel version of The Moors that is a lot less focused on really the dialogue or the action of the story. It's more showing like an energy shift, and it really draws a lot of parallels with like the cruelty of nature itself. This version really focuses on the childhood more than any other version, and so you very slowly see that relationship between Kathy and Heath form. There's this one moment where Heath and Kathy are wrestling in the mud that just really stuck with me. It really captured the uncomfortable energy that they had, this like desire and hatred at the same time. This version also shows Kathy much more as a bystander to the abuse. Yes, in every version she yells at Hindley or she tells people to stop, but she also watches Heathcliff get beat time and time again and still encourages him to break the rules and hang out with her. Edgar calls her friend Heath slurs right in front of her, and she still chooses to talk to him and eventually marry him, even though he acted in this really horrifying way to someone she cared about. Kathy is kind of oblivious to the power dynamic between them. There's a scene where Heathcliff gets really brutally beaten and he's thrown in the barn afterwards. So Kathy comes up after and just asks, "Are you hurt?"
Are you hurt?
The answer to that question is so obvious and redundant that you really see Kathy's denial and distancing herself from what is actually going on. On that note, this is like a really difficult movie to watch. Like it's not fun. There's a lot of animal cruelty, human cruelty, racism. The film is not an enjoyable experience, but that feels very intentional. We also shift the timeline in this one, so Heath runs away as a kid, actually. When he comes back, him and Kathy are played by young adult actors, so when they see each other again, it really does feel like they're different people because they literally are. That being said, it is harder to connect with the adult actors. The slow atmospheric thing in the beginning makes a little bit more sense, but I feel like you just needed more dialogue between the two to build chemistry as adults. It did end with a Mumford & Sons song. I did have to take a star off on Letterboxd just for that reason. What if I told you that the Lifetime movie The Wrong Boyfriend, originally titled Wuthering Heights, was one of the most underappreciated films of our time?
I have to get home.
There is just something about the energy of a YA drama that just makes sense with Wuthering Heights.
I used to laugh a lot. I used to be savage and free. Now they say I'm a freak. But who wants to be basic?
Yes, Edgar is an incel that gets friend-zoned.
She likes you too.
You think?
How'd you like our party?
I didn't.
Oh yeah, it was so lame. Friend zoned. That's what I get for being nice.
I do believe that Heathcliff would do handstands on his skateboard outside Kathy's study hall. Instead of Nellie being their housekeeper, she's Kathy's frenemy because they both slept with the same guy named Lockwood.
Are you still into Lockwood?
No.
Helen?
Hell no.
It's just a vibe. In this modern version, Kathy and Lee are the kids of this guy Earnshaw, who is a fashion mogul, which, if true, explain the fashion, Kathy. Or lack thereof. The Hannah Montana sequin vest? Heath, on the other hand, is the son of an immigrant worker who works at the Earnshaw factory, who is taken by ICE.
He's a U.S. citizen. He's the son of my very best employee. His mother, she worked for me for 20 years. She was taken away yesterday.
Fuck that, by the way. So Earnshaw takes Heath in while they're trying to find out where his mom is. Because of that, there's this real tension of Kathy and Heath's relationship where Kathy will kind of cosplay poverty around Heath without actually being able to connect to what he's been through. And then she's still hanging out with the Lintons on the other side of that. Heath's rage and abandonment issues make sense in the story because you understand where that trauma is coming from. Also, the depraved alcoholic Hindley of the books that throws a baby down the stairs. In this version, he's just a guy dealing with addiction issues.
Why did you say that? He's sick. He's an addict.
Like, this is actually kind of woke heights, and I love it. Now, is the acting bad? Yes, very much so.
All you ever cared about is your stupid company. No wonder Mom killed herself. Here's a favor. How about I don't kick your teeth in just this once?
There are also some gratuitous shots of women in bikinis throughout the movie, despite them all being high schoolers. Listen, I think the scriptwriter really got it. The director, not so much. When Kathy dies, even though they shoot the scene physically at the beach, they just have one shot of her with a green screen.
Captain, away!
It's so subtle you barely notice. When she dies, you can see her still supporting her neck when she hits the sand. This script was wasted on Lifetime production. I need a redo with maximum budget. Some of you may know if you've seen my Bad Cinderella video that I have been an Emerald Fennell hater for quite some time. I'm gonna say right now that I don't think Wuthering Heights is her worst work. Not even her worst adaptation of classic literature, because we all know what her true worst project was.
I'm not your Cinderella. I'm your bad Cinderella. Freak, a rebel, that's all me.
And the bar is simply that low. I have never been a fan of Emerald Fennell. She has always been a style over substance kind of director who really rides on shock value to distract from her either inability or unwillingness to engage with class, race, or gender politics, which honestly would be fine. Like, she doesn't have to engage with stuff to make a movie. You can just make a pretty movie. But with Saltburn and Promising Young Woman and Bad Cinderella, she presents as if she's saying something, when in fact she's saying nothing, except maybe saying something really spiteful towards the middle class for some reason. This is a big issue with like Oscar bait movies that really drives me crazy. Like, everyone wants to say they made a movie like Parasite, but no one actually has the balls to make Parasite. And would you believe that the jewelry heiress and goddaughter of Andrew Lloyd Webber is maybe just not the best equipped to make that kind of story? I have a lot of not positive things to say about this movie, so I will defend Emerald for a second. Okay? Most of the criticism of this movie I agree with. There has been some that I find just to be kind of silly or not particularly nuanced. There's been a lot of talk, for example, about the costuming and the sets, how they look very plasticky and fake. Obviously, they are not historically accurate. It's not intended to be. And the clothes are not only meant to look inaccurate, they're meant to look like plastic. So when Kathy is at Wuthering Heights, Kathy wears very natural materials. The colors are still bright, but the fabrics are all soft, and she's proportioned realistically. But when she's at Wuthering Heights, the proportion of everything, the rooms, the clothes, it's all like a dollhouse, because the life she's living at Wuthering Heights is a facade. And in case you didn't get that metaphor, Isabel does stand and show Kathy this dollhouse replica of the Grange that she's built, because again, Emerald Fennell's writing is not particularly strong. It's not just that it's meant to look over the top, it's meant to look plasticky and kind of cheap. I do not think that good cinema needs to restrain itself with period accurate clothing, and I do think that there is something underappreciated about visual storytelling through costumes. One thing I will always give Fennell credit for is her visual eye. This time around, she worked with cinematographer Linus Sandgren, best known for his work on La La Land, which I don't particularly like La La Land either, but that's another story. But the way they play with color throughout this movie is really cool. I am sick of the overly blurry, washed out gray tones of modern movies. None of that is here. In the beginning of the movie, there's this scene where Kathy walks over pig's blood and the blood trails at the end of her dress. And then at the end of the movie, when she's dying, you see that same blood pattern. The skin room has wallpaper of Margot Robbie's actual skin. There are so many cool details in there, and I can tell that Emerald puts a lot of effort into those details. But the casting, I hadn't even read Wuthering Heights, mind you, when this casting was announced in 2024, so I wasn't even aware of the whitewashing part of it, which is a significant part, right? But this casting, especially right after the hype of the Barbie movie, just felt like a Twitter fan casting, which is an insult to Twitter fan casting because they did get us Elle Fanning as Effie. But we are supposed to believe, even setting aside the whitewashing, that this man is an outcast in society, and we're supposed to believe that Kathy is ignorant to the ways of the world. Emerald has said in so many words that this adaptation was not so much a faithful recreation of the book, but more her idea of what it was. Taking what she liked out of the book, you know, the sexy romance, and removing the parts she didn't like, or the things that burden the romance, like the racism and the violence. Because that's less fun to imagine, I suppose. That was some crazy PR though. Can we talk about that? People would ask her and Jacob. Jacob does not get off scot-free either. How do you react to people who are criticizing you for whitewashing? And her response would just be like, oh, well, Jacob is just what I imagined Heathcliff looking like when I was 14. Like, he's just the only thing I could picture of a dark, sexy looking man. And I'm like, you need to stop telling on yourself, Emerald. That is not saying what you think it's saying. I at least kind of give her credit. I don't know if credit's the right word, but she did remove the Romani slurs. I don't think they're trying to pretend that Jacob is Romani or a person of color, although the gold tooth and hoop earring does give me pause. Maybe that's just a coincidence. It's just a very basic, like, rich girl falls in love with stable boy kind of thing, which isn't bad in itself, but it is very generic. You've heard a lot of people call this the smooth-brained Wuthering Heights, and I do think that's a very apt description. And the race-blind casting presents another issue. Race-blind casting can work, but if it changes the context of the story, it can inadvertently whitewash society or villainize the people of color in ways that weren't intended in the original work. Edgar is played by Shahzad Latif, who is much closer to the description of Heath in the book. But in this version, he is in the upper class. He's in a position of power, and he's very much painted as the less desirable option. Margot's Kathy never really has romantic affection for him because she loves, again, the outcast Jacob Elordi, the most textbook handsome white guy you've ever seen. I do think that Emerald wanted to still include the discrimination in some way. Nellie Dean in this version is played by Hong Chow, and she is an illegitimate child who has proximity to the rich. She lives in this nice house, has relationships with these people, but she can never be the rich, and there is always a sense of shame just because of who she is. There are some people who think that Nellie is the real villain of Wuthering Heights in the book, which I do not agree with whatsoever. And Emerald says that she doesn't agree with that, but honestly, I think that she might be lying because she does Nellie dirty in this version. In this version, Nellie is an active obstacle to Kathy and Heath's relationship. You see as children that she's jealous of Heath and Kathy. She intentionally baits Kathy into shit-talking Heathcliff in front of him, which causes him to run away. She intercepts their letters, prevents them from speaking. To Heath and Kathy, she is kind of the villain. Now let's think about this. Nellie, in the book, not a person of color, right? And we're now adding villainous traits to this character who we've now made a person of color. Heathcliff, on the other hand, we've made white, and we've also gotten rid of a lot of the villainous traits of Heathcliff, who is now white. That is a prime example of race-blind casting just not working. Because Heath is totally softened here. Instead of abusing Isabella, which is one of the darkest moments in the book, they have a consenting BDSM relationship. He asks Isabella like 10 times if he can mistreat her. He's not violent, he's not scary, he's just kind of like, where my hug at kind of guy. The comparison between the portrayal of Nellie and Heath in this says something, and it doesn't say something great. There are some attempts, I think, to address racism or class. There's that one scene where Nellie talks about being a bastard. Edgar is referred to as new money, implying that he wouldn't be as respectable as a person of color without his wealth. But those moments feel fleeting in comparison to the times that these characters are active barriers to the relationship between Heath and Kathy, who are the heroes of this story. I also think that Jacob and Margot are both too old for the characters that they're playing. It is fine to change the ages from the book. Pretty much every adaptation uses actors in the late 20s or 30s, which isn't accurate. But so much of this story is Margot not knowing what sex is or what relationships are like. And Margot herself said that she thinks this character is between 25 and 35. I just don't believe that these two would be that shocked when they saw two servants getting mildly freaky in a barn. I'm not scandalized by their sex montage. I'm surprised that they're scandalized by it. This movie loves a montage, by the way. There's another at the end when Kathy dies and they cut back to Kathy and Heath as kids, and it's like, oh, look what they could have been, how tragic. It's supposed to be this big emotional tipping point, and it's just cornball. The writing also just feels very patronizing, very on the nose. Like, there'll be a character who's a misogynist, so he'll just be like, I hate women. That's like literally his dialogue. Or how this version of Wuthering Heights is an homage to Romeo and Juliet. So they have Isabella babble for 5 minutes straight just explaining the plot of Romeo and Juliet, just so the audience can go, hey, wait a minute, that thing like this thing. Owen Cooper, who plays young Heathcliff, is genuinely scary in adolescence. I know this actor is capable. Both him and Jacob can really play a menacing but charming character. So it's such a bummer for Owen especially that his time is stuck doing really on-the-nose exposition. I've said a lot of negative things, so I'll end with something positive. I really loved when they played Dark-Eyed Sailor performed by Olivia Chaney. This movie is so over the top throughout, so there's this quiet moment with stripped vocals showing Kathy experiencing a miscarriage, and it's really effective. YouTube has been extra strict about music lately, so I'm not gonna play it, but listen to the soundtrack. I heard a lot about the opening scene in test screenings, and I was terrified for what I was gonna see. But you know, when I actually saw it, I got it. I got this choice. I think baby Kathy screaming and cheering at a man hanging, and also the man randomly has a boner, I don't know, was an excellent way to show Kathy as kind of a sadist and also just set the tone for this being a dark, horny movie, even if it didn't end up being particularly dark or even like that horny. As an adaptation of Wuthering Heights, it is not good. As its own film, also not for me. As a Charlie XCX album visualizer, pretty good. So let me sum up with my favorites and least favorites. Favorites, 2011, 2009, and y'all, I gotta be honest, 2015 Wuthering High. For worst, it's 2002 Spark House by far. 2003 is also bad, but it has the charm of being a so bad it's good kind of movie. So my other least favorites are 1958 and 2026. I hope y'all had a good time, enjoyed your cross-promotional acai bowl while you were listening to this. If you want to hear more from me, I'm doing the cliche YouTuber thing where like I have 3 different channels that are really vaguely different at best. My gaming channel where I upload VODs. My gaming, I also now have a spam channel where I kind of just am gonna post whatever I want to post over there. Maybe it'll be often, maybe not, but just sort of things I feel like I don't want to post on the main channel for whatever reason. Also, Patreon. So if you want to check that out, there's lots of stuff going on, things are happening. But if you're not interested in any of that, that's totally fair. I get it, it's a lot. But if you liked this video, if you like acai, you could feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see y'all in the next one. Bye.